Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services. This meeting is being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and everyone speaking will be on camera. Can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished? Introductions. Shall we start with members?
I'm Councillor George Madrick of the Paulsgrove Ward and Opposition Spokesperson of the Portsmouth Independent Group.
Thank you, George.
Councillor Lee Mason, Cosham Ward, Opposition Spokesman for Communities and Central Services.
Thank you, Lee.
Asghar Shah, Councillor for Cosham and Opposition in the Communities and Central Services. Labour.
Thank you, Shah. Appreciate it. And officers here this afternoon?
Thank you. Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Natasha.
Karolina Szczepaniak, pronouns she and her, Equality and Diversity Officer.
Thank you, Carolina.
James Gagliardini, Community Engagement and Inclusion Programme Manager.
Thank you, James.
Sue Page, Finance.
If we get you a little closer, I'm sure people need to...
Sue Page, Finance.
No, thank you, Sue. Thank you.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
And thank you, James. No apologies this afternoon. Members, any declarations of interest for this afternoon's meeting? No, thank you very much. We've had no written deputations or anybody requesting to make their presence known. Record of previous meeting, Lee, we were both here.
It doesn't have, I did raise the concern I hadn't had information I requested from one of your directors, and it doesn't mention that in here, and I've still not had the information either. So.
Okay, Natasha?
Is this in relation to costs? I will come back to you on that, Lee. Apologies.
Okay, could we have it included in the minutes, please? Because it raised in a public meeting is a way of ensuring that it is.
Okay, we'll ensure that that's minuted. Are you okay for the rest of the minutes?
With the addition of
that? With the addition of that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, to the substantive part of the meeting. Item 4 on the agenda, distribution of equalities funding. Natasha, it's back to you. Do you have anything to add by way of introduction or to add to the report?
No, thank you. Just to outline the distribution that's recommended in the report, which I'm hoping everybody has read. All of these recommended grants allocations are for activities or organisations that support equality and inclusion within the city. I would draw attention, however, to the grant scheme, which is also proposed as part of this distribution, but I will hand over to colleagues Carolina and James to talk a little bit more about the scheme itself and how it will operate.
Thank you. Carolina, you look poised.
I will start. So we are aware, I think, that under the Equality Act 2010 we do have our public sector equality duty, which means that we should be trying to enhance the equality within the city, fight discrimination and foster good relationships between the communities. So me and James did quite a bit of work when I first started. We continue to do that when we are meeting with community groups and organizations in the city, and a lot of them have stated that one of the barriers for them to be able to do their work is funding. So we are proposing that £30,000 of the Equalities Fund is allocated to a community inclusion grant scheme, as Natasha has mentioned. which is going to help us to enhance the EDI agenda across the city, promote equality, diversity and inclusion initiatives, support community and residents with protected characteristics, advance community cohesion and diversity and tackling inequalities, which is also going to help us to get better in terms of our strategy as well when we have the new strategy next year, and just to fit in with what really we should be doing as a local authority in this space. So we're hoping that the grant priorities would be challenging inequality. So we're hoping to see projects that will eliminate discrimination and advance equality by improving outcomes and access for people to services, information and or employment. So this can be anything from awareness training of equality and diversity and inclusion, or meetups, any training, for instance, with applications for jobs and things like that. Celebrating and encouraging diversity, so activities which celebrate and encourage and raise awareness of diverse cultures and identities by bringing people together with an aim to build a strong and cohesive communities. So studies have proven that empathy is one of the best tools to fight prejudice, so we are hoping that by bringing people together, having almost the step into someone else's shoes, we will be able to advance cohesion within the community and reduce prejudice and hate crimes and incidents. And support for protected characteristics, minority groups and disadvantaged groups. So activities which can help to reduce isolation, build resilience and independence, help people stay safe, help people learn and prosper, and help people to stay healthy, particularly where there is an inequality gap that's been identified. So we will be considering the applications, and we at least one of the priorities, one of the 3 priorities I've just given will have to be met for the applications to be considered. So I've mentioned the work that we've been doing with groups around the city, so I will hand over to James now and he can talk about who we are hoping will be able to apply for this grant and then also how we are going to be scoring it.
Thank you, Carolina. So as Carolina said, it's a really exciting for us prospect with these grant schemes. And what we'd like to do is advertise this to as many groups as possible within the city with an aim to reach particularly marginalised and seldom groups that sometimes we don't necessarily hear from. The fund will be open to groups or charities who are working within the boundaries of Portsmouth City Council, providing facilities, activities or services for the benefit of Portsmouth residents. They must have a bank account in the name of the organisation with a recent bank statement for evidence, a policy describing how they will safeguard children, young people or vulnerable adults, evidence of relevant insurance. Any organisation that does apply that doesn't have these in place at the moment will be directed to the Hive in Portsmouth for support. So hopefully that shouldn't discount many of the smaller groups out there in the city. The application process, so applications will be online, but there'll also be paper copies available within libraries across the city, because obviously we recognise that not everybody has access to computers, etc., and we don't want to discount any organisations or individuals from applying for this. How will the grants be awarded? So a range of council officers working within communities across the city, as well as representation from partners in the voluntary sector, will be invited to score applications on a set criteria. These scores will be used to inform a final decision from the Cabinet member. The panel will score against the following criteria: the project benefits. So the panel will be reviewing the quality of the proposed project, looking for clearly articulated outcomes and defined beneficiaries. This might include the number and range of beneficiaries, the degree of benefit, the vulnerability of the targeted group, intersectionality, deprivation and or equality factors. Evidence of need or demand. The panel will look for evidence of arising from lived experience to highlight the needs of underrepresented groups or individuals with protected characteristics. Measuring success. The recipients of the grant will be provided with an evaluation tool which will allow the recipients to self-evaluate and give assurance that the outcomes have been met. funding priorities, the panel will be looking for clear evidence of how the project will be met will meet at least one of the 3 grant priorities. So challenging inequality, celebrating and encouraging diversity, and support for protected characteristics, minority and/or disadvantaged groups. And obviously we'll be looking at the organisations themselves to ensure that the organisation is properly governed. So as we were saying, the grants will be open to any organisation within the city who wish to increase maybe the membership of their group to diverse communities. It could be looking to improve accessibility in terms of disabilities. So there's no kind of limits to what people might want to bid for.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you both for your energy working up the Community Inclusion Grant Scheme. It's going to do a lot of good, I hope. Members, questions, thoughts, comments on the equalities piece? Shah?
Actually, I've got a couple of questions, if I may ask, small. How did you decide on these fundings and what was the criteria used? And the next question is, were other groups considered for the funding and on what basis have they been rejected? And the third question is, where and how was the fund advertised to voluntary and community groups?
Well, I think work backwards. The answer to question 3 is from Monday. The scheme will go live, and perhaps James and Carolina will speak a bit more about that in a second. Natasha, did you want to pick up on some of the other points?
Yes, of course. So the distribution of the funding was looked at by the administration and mirrors partly some of the examples provided when the budget amendment was made. So the actual budget amendment wording quote here is qualities and community initiative grants. For example, violence against women and girls, anti-racism, and the annual Pride event. So that informed some of these initiatives that are on here, but also, so for example, the Youth Voice Project picks up on the work undertaken in previous years by the Youth Parliament, so it's looking to continue that. The work that group did around anti-racism in schools, for example, was very well received, and the feedback from that has been very, very positive as a tool. So that was identified as a priority area to make sure, particularly in view of the pandemic and the impact on young people, that support is continued to ensure that young people in the city have a voice, and that funding can be allocated to continue the work that they're doing, which is very much focused on the equalities agenda. So a lot of work on continuing on anti-racism, but also on the LGBT agenda as well among young people and within schools. A violence against women and girls toolkit, again, that was an example that was cited in the budget amendment, and is a priority that Council have signed up to. Again, that's something that we're looking to deploy not just among young people and within schools, but also more broadly in the city and as a toolkit for employers, because this is a very real challenge that we have, and the government themselves have some priorities around this as well. Obviously the grant scheme, which Carolina and James have described. The Live Well community outreach programme is very much targeting health inequalities and poverty. That is a programme that has started in the pandemic and is something that we want to continue through the winter months, and that is a project that goes out to deprived communities and almost takes services to those communities, and it's not just council, it's a partnership, so it includes health colleagues, health partners, taking services to those communities. Some feedback from early engagement with those communities through the events that we've run has demonstrated that a lot of our communities don't actually know what services are available to them, and so it's taking those services out to them to make sure that they are aware of what they can access, and supporting them with advice and guidance around health and money advice, around the cost of living generally, as well as opportunities to be vaccinated against COVID, getting advice from health colleagues such as, I think we've got pharmacies at present, and other members of the NHS community providing health advice. So that work is unfunded, so the feedback from communities that we have done these events with has been that those communities are very keen that that work continues. They value that outreach programme, so some of this funding will be allocated to that. We've seen some real discernible benefit to those individuals that have attended those events. And then the community research and participation initiatives is very much around undertaking research and engaging with communities where we don't currently have allocated budget for the activity, just the staff resources. So raising awareness within the city around equalities more broadly, and being able to work with communities and share the messages and the work that we're doing. So that's how those particular initiatives were identified, but with a significant amount allocated to a grant scheme that communities and community organisations can actually apply for funding, so that is spread as wide as possible. So that's how that was determined. I hope that answers the question. Thank
you, Natasha. Shah, if I may ask you to turn your microphone off just so we don't get any sort of background noise. Thank you. Carolina, James, would you like to pick up the question about how the Community Inclusion Grant will be advertised and how people can apply?
Sure, not a problem. So the grants will go live from Monday, so this Monday coming up. An extensive media campaign has been drawn up within our comms team, which will include not just social media, but I believe there will be articles in the news as well. I think there's one already been cited, so that should be out there. We'll be also using the network that Carolina and I have built up since the time we've been in post to advertise directly to organisations ourselves. We've kind of started to do that already, so there are organisations who are kind of already champing at the bit, to be honest, to start applying, which is brilliant, as well as using the engagement officers that are already working as part of the City Council. They will be informed to pass the details of this scheme on to any groups or individuals that they're also working with. So hopefully that should capture, as well as, the Hive Portsmouth. So they've been involved, so they've also been asked to cascade this to their members and the organisations that they're working with.
Thank you, James. Shah, is that okay? Does that answer the questions? Yeah. Thank you. Lee.
Thank you very much. It's good to see the funding going into the Portsmouth Pride annual event, which has become quite a lively and popular occurrence. I know all the main parties were represented there, and I'm certain you guys will be represented next year. Just a few questions there, because I know it was a big difficulty for them last year trying to get the 5K that Councillor Dowling had promised them, and it was sort of different problems going forward. Is this figure on top of the 10K per year that Gerald, or the leader, had promised them for the next 3 years, or is it instead of? Is this a 1 year allocation, or is it supposed to be spread over several years? Is it actually going to the group themselves, or is that what we're spending? So hopefully it'll be actually going over to them to provide it. And I'll get those answers first and ask the rest.
Okay, I shall.
So this is on top of the £5,000 that's already been allocated, and the intention is that this is spread over a period of 3 years. So it's intended to be sustainable funding. The leader is also engaging with other institutions in the city to try and secure match funding, so that there's even more sustainability for that event going forward. So this money will be going directly to the organisation.
Okay, you say 5k, but they were promised 10k per year by Gerald, so has that been reversed now?
So it's 5k that's already been allocated, plus 5k, that's for this year, and then another 10 and another 10 to make up the 25. So 5k already allocated, and then 25k to make up the balance for this year, and then 10k for each subsequent year for 3 years.
Okay. It's just been re-announced as so it's the same as what they've already had since the budget, pretty much. Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? George, okay.
Nothing really, not overly. It sounds all good. I'd like a bit more details about this toolkit that's being provided for violence against women and girls. A bit more fleshed out details on that. I don't have to have it now. I'll be happy to have it at a later date, unless you know. Yeah, I'd prefer more details on it if possible, just how the money's being spent and what actually is included within this toolkit, how people can use it. Just a bit more detail, really, because it's kind of something I'm working on the side with another councillor, so it'd be really interesting to hear more about that. In relation to Portsmouth Pride, obviously it's a great scheme. I would be really interested to speak to an officer in regards to inclusion, because obviously you're talking about inclusion of different parts of society. I do have somebody I know very well that used to be involved in it in some capacity. He runs a lot of events and nights around the city, and he strongly feels that he was excluded from taking part last year, and it forced him and a small group of that community, about 20-25 people, not to attend the event. So no fault of this council at all, I'm sure, but maybe one of the officers could just touch base with him, because he's like the lead of that little group, and just see where the problem lies there, and see if we can rectify it, just so that they can feel included again like they were before. But other than that, the rest of it looks great, fantastic, no problems at all, and yeah, I support it.
Great, thank you, George. Are we able to give a little bit more insight into the toolkit?
So yeah, I mean the toolkit will be very similar to the anti-racism toolkit that was developed last year and has been deployed in schools. So essentially what it is a resource pack that can be used by, so the anti-racism one is a resource pack that can be used by teachers in the classroom to teach children around racism and anti-racism and how to prevent racism in the school setting. So it's looking to create a similar resource pack, if you like, for deployment in schools. We know from colleagues in education that violence against girls in schools is a very real thing and a problem, but we also know that in the world of employment, it is present there as well. It might take a different form. Sometimes it's more in the form of sexual harassment, but it can escalate, and particularly when you have power dynamics between young women entering the workforce and people in positions of power. It is an equal challenge for along the violence against women and girls agenda. So it's about creating a resource pack that can be used by teachers for school settings and by managers and HR departments in employer settings. So it's a resource pack that gives people the ability to train, guide, and deploy different tools, if you like. But Carolina will be very happy to come and talk to you in more detail about that work. We'll be commissioning somebody to develop that resource pack, a specialist in the field. And in terms of the inclusion point that you made by somebody that you know, a community group, again, very happy for Carolina will make contact with you so that we can follow up with that individual.
Happy? Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Well, I want to say a few words in respect of the grant scheme. As Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services, I get to meet lots of brilliant, wonderful, extraordinary, inspiring Portsmouth people, volunteers, carers, community organisers and good neighbours. They're often unsung heroes, and their quiet dedication is what makes them special. I personally hope that they'll be the sort of people who will apply for a community inclusion grant to enable them to to either start or to perhaps continue the activities that challenge inequality, advance equality and celebrate diversity in Portsmouth. Thank you all for your work on that piece. Last chance for any more comments, questions, thoughts before we move on. Okay, well, I'm very pleased to recommend that the budget allocation is distributed as follows. 1, Portsmouth Pride annual event, £25,000. 2, Live Well community outreach programme, £10,000. 3, Youth Voice project, £14,000. 4, community research and participation initiatives, £11,000. 5, Violence Against Women and Girls Toolkit, £5,000. 6, Community Inclusion Grant Scheme, £30,000. And 7, unallocated contingency, £5,000. As Cabinet Member, I hereby approve this recommendation. Shall we move on?
Could we just include in that highlight that it's over 3 years, because anyone reading this might be confused. Yep. That is for where it says annual event. It would be assumed that an annual event receiving 25k is for that year. No,
I think that's sensible. Just to clarify, we'll do that. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Item 5, monitoring of the first quarter 22-23 revenue cash limits. Sue, over to you. Do you have anything to add, or by way of introduction to your report?
I was just going to introduce the report and say that the summary position is set out in the paragraph 3.1. You can see that the main reason is the significant exceptional cost of energy across the portfolio, and I refer you to the Cabinet report of the 27th of September, which notes that these exceptional and significant items related to energy will be met from the Council's corporate contingency. After taking those items into account, you have still an overspend of approximately 378,000, and you've got the explanations across the section in the main report. As you're aware, the first call for overspends is your portfolio reserve, and beyond that it would be a clawback, but this situation we are not using the full reserve. There is still a small residual sum after that. And this is the position as at Q1, so you officers get the opportunity to do remedial action and put things in place, so you'll get an update at Q2 and beyond for the rest of the year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Well, as you say, you'll be back in November with Q2 forecast, which will give us probably a better view of what's happening across the portfolio. Members, questions, comments and thoughts on the forecast? No?
I had opportunity to ask my questions
in
advance, so I'd just really like to thank the finance team for the work they're doing on this and trying to keep us on track when we're in a difficult situation.
Here, second that. Thank you, Sue. I think you've escaped lightly there. Just no questions on the forecast. Okay, members, officers, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That concludes today's business. I note the finance report and I close the meeting at 14:29.